Rick Tittle can usually be found at He Baby Mama House.
Thank you for that, and welcome back to the show. Rick Tittle with you coast to coast, border to border, and around the world on the American Forces Radio Network. It's our pleasure now to welcome to the show author Candace Bushnell. Her new book is called Is There Still Sex in the City? And it is available now in hardback. And Candace, it's a cool story, if you don't mind me saying so, that you had this life in Manhattan, and then you went suburban in Connecticut, and now you're back, baby. Is that right?
Yes, that's exactly it. That is it. It was real, is there still sex in the city? It's about a passage that I went through in my 50s where I felt like I kind of had to relight my pilot light. And it's about the new middle age. At one time, people who were in their 50s, we were really supposed to retire and go away. You're kind of maybe supposed to you're kind of going to give up, wear sensible shoes, let your hair go gray. But that doesn't make any sense in these times that we live in. People are much younger, they're much more vibrant, and they've got more life in them. So it becomes a time of, as I said before, like figuring out how to get your mojo back.
And it's funny, one of the things that I was reading, I read a New York Times article that you had retweeted about it, and you said that, on weekends you would hang out with your friends and do a brunch, and you're like, now you're exercising. You're in the park with your dogs, you're on a trampoline, and so that's one of the big changes, right?
Yes. I think that one of the things that happens, and I also write in the book about the super middles, because this is a time when people realize you kind of, if you want to feel good, you kind of have to be healthy. And there are some people who, they really, really embrace that. And I call them the super middles. And, these are people who, they actually look better than they ever have before because they never exercised before. They eat right, they don't drink alcohol, they're obsessed with vitamins and that kind of thing. But that's also part of this time and this passage, is that it's a very good thing to be healthy. And yeah, so that is one of the things that I do.
Well,
and you know what?
What?
It's actually great, because I ride my bike and I like riding my bike. I really have a good time.
No doubt about it. I like the term super middle because I'm 54, but I still think I'm 26 in my head. I dress like it.
Exactly.
I act like it. And then I kind of realize people say, oh my gosh, you're that old. And then I think, about when I was in college and my dad was 50, I thought he was the oldest guy ever. It's just a whole new perspective.
I know. It really is a different time. Now, are you married?
Oh my gosh. You know what? My whole situation has to do, it's a whole book in itself. We'll save that for another day.
Okay.
It's called, I was going to make a bad joke. We probably can't do it on regular radio. By the way, you're no relation to I'm switching topics. You're no relation to the binocular fortune, are you?
Well, I'll tell you that I'm not a relation to any fortune. I think, you see, I always thought that the Bushnell binoculars was a different family. My family came to New England and actually came to Connecticut in, I think, 1634.
Wow.
And so they came here very early and were, quite a bit in Connecticut, but then some of my ancestors, they went to New York State, and then from New York State went out west by covered wagon. Now, so I thought that the Bushnell binoculars was different, but I did just recently meet someone who said that, no, the Bushnell binoculars is part of that old Bushnell family.
Uh-huh.
So there you go. My branch of the family, they ain't no millionaires, I'll tell you that much.
I'm going to drop a name here, but I had the distinct pleasure a couple of years ago of interviewing Dick Cavett. And I asked him what has changed in Manhattan. Now, of course, he's been there, over 50 years. And he said something that I was kind of surprised. He said, you can't drive anywhere now. And I kind of thought it was always like that. But he said, now you really can't drive anywhere. What has changed for you since your time there in the 80s and 90s?
Well, the city is much more corporate. It used to be that the city was unique, and I think that the city felt Manhattan really felt like it was its own separate island from the rest of the country. There were not chain stores in Manhattan. And there are now. So there's been it's not just a gentrification, but it's the influx of really like these huge box stores that were only in the suburbs that have come into Manhattan. So, Manhattan, into New York, Brooklyn and all of those places. But the city it's become more like every other place.
What's funny is that I haven't lived there, but every time I go to Manhattan, I think it's just one of the most amazing, wonderful places of all time. But then I kind of think, what would it be like if I lived here? Now, are you Upper West or Upper East now?
Now I'm on the Upper East Side. I would never live on the Upper West Side because it's just not me.
Can you tell a Californian the big difference between the two?
Well, the Upper West Side was always like more families and kids, but now the Upper East Side is like that too. The East Side used to be a little bit more glamorous than the Upper West Side, and yeah, it was a bit more glamorous. And but now there are tons of kids on the Upper East Side, and that's the other thing that's really, really changed in the city. At one time there weren't a lot of people who raised their kids.
Yeah.
In New York, I mean, you really had, there were, people did have kids in the city, and there were they did go to local schools, etc. But the local schools were not very good. So a lot of the people who had kids in the city were, the 1%, we have a nanny type. And, there didn't used to be tons of people who could afford to live like that. And now there are, and they're all on the Upper East Side.
What do you think, and by the way, the new book, as I mentioned, Is There Still Sex in the City? If you don't mind me saying so, you look fantastic, and so I'm sure you have a lot of suitors. So what is it like now? How has it changed for you?
Well, the reality is that I have a boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm not really looking for any suitors.
Well, until you got the boyfriend, though. You...
it was really... until I got the boyfriend, honestly, it was sad. There wasn't anybody who I wanted to date, and, a lot of men who are interested in, if you want to have sex with a married man, sure, you can, there's some of those floating around, but I'm not going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
so there were definitely some frustrations. And then I went to a party and I ran into a man who I had actually met a couple of times before. We have a lot of friends in common, but our circles only crossed a couple of times. And it turns out that he's best friends with Chris Noth, who plays Mr. Big in a TV series.
How ironic.
Exactly. I can't get away from Mr. Big. We used to live in the same building. Me and Chris Noth. And then he would always be yelling at me.
Well, last question for you. What is it like when you became so iconic and really, in a way, changed the way a whole generation of young ladies looked at themselves and at dating and all of that stuff?
I am still pretty much the same person I've always been. I mean, I'm pretty down to earth. I can, put on the clothes and do the dog and pony show, but in my everyday life, I'm really just working and kind of not being glamorous and wearing a scrunchie in my hair. So I'm pretty modest because, it's great to have recognition and appreciation from the outside, but, it's like your inner value really has to come from yourself. So that's, something that I'm very cognizant of.
That's very cool. By the way, do you ever run into Sarah Jessica Parker? She seems like she's in Manhattan all the time.
The crazy thing is I don't. And it's so interesting because I think we do know some of the same people. Before she did Sex and the City, I think I met her once. And then when she was doing Sex and the City, I would see her a little bit more. And I think since the last movie, I haven't run into her. I run into Cynthia Nixon quite a bit.
Yes. Wasn't she running for political office?
She was. But for some reason I run into her. I just tend to run into her like in the Hamptons and in New York, and she's great.
Well,
and then, of course, Chris knows I see him quite a bit.
Yeah, that's just too funny. Want to remind everybody, and I think these books are going to go like hotcakes, Is There Still Sex in the City by Candace Bushnell, available now from Grove Press. She has been our guest. Hey, Candace, congratulations on the success of the book.